Oh, welcome back to Train Signal. You're watching Running Office from another machine where we're going to be implementing remote apps. And I just couldn't come up with any really good snarky title or subtitle in this one. So in this video, I'm going to show you pretty quick and easy how to install Office on the TS server. I know, this is not rocket science, right? It's a very simple installation. And then I'm going to show you how to add it into the remote apps section. And that's a real simple process too. Then I'm going to talk to you about shortcuts versus using TS Web Access. There's actually two different ways that you can access a remote application from a TS server. You can either do it, just a shortcut, or you can actually access it via a web page. So kind of a cool set of options there. And then I'm also going to talk to you about Terminal Services Gateway. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with this. You've got Terminal Services installed, so what we're going to be doing is, you already know that Hank's new software is going to be using Microsoft Office to build those reports, and we're not entirely clear on how all that's going to work yet, but we know we need to get Office installed on the Terminal Services server so it can be accessed remotely by Hank and by other sales staff. So then once we actually have it installed, then we're going to run the remote app wizard, and I'm going to show you how to make applications that have been installed on the server available to Terminal Services users. Okay? All right, so real short introduction. Let's just get into the work and let me show you how this gets done. All right, so here we are over on the Hyper-V machine. I just wanted to show you here real quick what I'm about to do. I actually have an ISO file, a copy of the disk for Microsoft Office Enterprise. This is 2007. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using Hyper-V, obviously, because that's what our TS machine is. I'm going to show you how to load up this ISO file so it can be used as a CD/DVD-ROM. All right, so I'm going to open up TS1 on the Hyper-V here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the File menu. I'm going to go here to Settings. And I think we probably have seen this before, but I want to show this to you again. You can use a regular DVD, by the way, or CD-ROM, but we can also use ISO files quickly and easily. Let me just show you how this works. Right over here, here's my DVD drive. I'm going to select it. And right now you see that my virtual DVD drive is not using anything. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using that ISO file, or the image file, and really pretend like it is the physical DVD. Now, if you want to use the physical DVD, I could go ahead and select physical CD/DVD drive. Now I'm going to go ahead and, since we're not going to do that, I'm going to use the image file option. We're going to browse for it here. And then you'll see I'm here on the desktop. I'm going to select the Office Enterprise ISO file. We'll select that one, and we're going to go ahead and pull it up here so I can get to the OK, since on my screen is really low resolution. And that will make that ISO file available to me just like a regular DVD or CD-ROM. Okay, there we go. And look, the autoplay has already kicked up here, so let's go ahead and let's run setup. I'm going to go ahead and make this guy full screen now so we can see everything that's happening the best that we can. And there we go. We're going to go ahead and accept the terms of the agreement and continue. And we're going to go ahead and click on Install Now. So just a regular old Microsoft Office Enterprise installation process. Nothing really fantastic here. I'm going to pause the video while this guy gets installed. And then as soon as it's done, I'll be right back and show you the next steps. All right, so Microsoft Office has been successfully installed. Let's go ahead and close that out. And so now that that has been installed, let's go to the TS Remote App Manager. Now, this is a very simple process, and you're probably thinking, wow, this is really easy. And yeah, it really is. So here in TS Remote App Manager, we're going to use this Add Remote App Programs link, and that should begin our Remote App Wizard. How about that? We'll tell it next. And now we basically just get to select the applications that we want to make available. So we're going to go ahead and make available Microsoft Word. And tell you what, just to make it interesting, we'll put in Excel too. And really any application that is already installed on this server would be available to us to be accessed through TS Remote App. Okay, so really easy stuff. We just pick the stuff that we actually do want. Let's see, is there anything else? I think it's pretty good. And now we can also select the application and click on Properties. And there's several different items that we could do here. We can make it available through TS Web Access. Remember how I was talking to you about that a little earlier? You can actually access these applications either from a shortcut on the desktop or from a web page. And it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of another. However, if you are going to be allowing folks to get to these applications from the outside world, it's probably the best bet to use it through web access to make it at least easier for them to get to. Also, we could include any command line arguments that might accompany the applications. We really don't have any for Microsoft Word, so we'll just cancel out. Alright, so we're going to tell it next. Here's the 2 programs we're adding. Is it available through TS Web Access? Yes. So both of our applications will be available through TS Web Access. And we'll tell it to finish. And all of those applications are actually available to us. Now, let's take a look at this here. The TS Web Access Computers group is empty. Remote app programs may be unavailable to users. Well, that is a bit of a problem. What we're going to need to do is we're going to actually need to add in computers that will have access to TS Web Access. I'll show you that in just a moment here. Let me scroll down. I want to show you some of these other things that are actually in this screen here. All remote app programs are visible in TS Web Access. That's good. A remote desktop connection for the server is not visible in TS Web Access. Well, here's the thing. TS Web Access and Terminal Services really overall actually utilizes remote desktop protocol for pretty much everything. Okay? So that's something that we probably will want to change. Let's go ahead and click on Change here. And you'll notice here that that opens up the remote app deployment settings. Let's take a look through here. Here is our server name. Okay, well that's good. If this terminal server is in a farm, meaning if we have multiple terminal services, then we would enter the DNS name of the farm. Well, that's not what we're wrestling right now. Here is the remote desktop port that we're going to be using. So that might be one of those things we might want to sketch down real quick on paper. Require server authentication. Yes, that's a good idea. Do we want to show the remote desktop connection? We don't necessarily have to, okay, just so you know. It's one of those things that we may or may not want to accomplish. We'll see more about that in TS Web Access a little later on. Access to unlisted programs. Do not allow users to start unlisted programs on initial connection. Yes, we only want to allow our users to have access to the 2 Microsoft Office applications that we are making available to them. Now, you'll notice here we have other options for the TS Gateway because we have that installed as well. And you'll notice here that all we have to do is really automatically detect TS Gateway server settings. That's good. Digital signature. Do we want to use SSL and certificates to make our transmission secure? Well, let's see if we can make this happen here. We'll go ahead and we'll put a check mark in sign with a digital certificate. We'll click on change because right now we don't have any certificates. Do we have any certificates in here? No. Okay, well that's something we'll have to remedy a little later on. Let's uncheck that for now. We're going to tell this one OK. Now down here you see we have other distribution options. How do we want to utilize them? Well, right now we don't have any TS computer groups in here, so we're going to have to come back to our distribution options a little later on. Let's scroll down here just a little bit. And then we'll see here that here are the applications that are available for use by remote application. All right, so we need to scroll back up top here and we need to take a look at this particular item. The TS Web Access Computers group is empty. Okay, let's click on Learn More here real quick. We'll open up the help window here. And basically what we need to do is we need to basically follow the instructions. Let's see what it says. To add the computer account of the TS Web Access server to the security group. On the terminal server, click Start, Administrative Tools, Computer Management. We need to go into Local Users and Groups, and then click on Groups in the right pane, double-click TS Web Access. Let's just go ahead and jump right in here to it. Let's go to Administrative Tools, Computer Management, and we'll bring up that MMC so we'll be able to follow the directions. And I'm bringing this thing out here to you because anytime, let me bring this back here, anytime that you find a feature or an element of Server 2008 that you're not really sure what to do with, I can't stress this enough, the help that they put into Server 2008 is really good. I'm really impressed with how much and how well they've documented so much of the features, especially. Let's go back to Computer Management and let's go into the Local Users and Groups, and we'll go into the Groups. And you'll notice here that we actually have, I'm going to expand this a little bit here, we have two groups that were created during the installation of Terminal Server. So here we have the TS Access Administrators and then TS Web Access Computers. Let's expand that. And TS Web Access Computers is what we need to pay attention to. Members of this group can query the list of remote app programs that are available from this Terminal Server. So here's what we have to keep in mind. Let's go ahead and open up this group here. Right now we don't have anybody, and more specifically any computers that can access this Terminal Server, so we need to fix that. Okay, let's click on Add. And now we need to put in the names of the computers that we want to make sure we can use to get to this Terminal Server. So, alright, so what we need to do is we need to put in the names of the computers. And right now, you see that we have users or groups up here. Now, we need to go into Object Types, put a check mark in Computers, and we can uncheck Groups and Users. That's fine. And we'll tell it OK. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's make this available on our web server so we can actually test this out. So we'll do web1-globo, and let's see if we can find it using check names. Yep, there we go. Fantastic. Okay, so web1-globo will add in here, so we can, at the very least, to test this out, we'll be able to access it on our web server. Now, at this point in time, if we need to give access to other users, we would need to make sure we have their computer names here in this box. So all of your client names will need to go into this particular app. Now, if it's a group of computers, it's probably the easiest way to do that, right? So we might have a group of sales user laptops that we're going to be providing access to this Terminal Server. So we would take all those laptop accounts, we'd put them into a group, and we'd add them here. For right now, though, what we're going to do is we're going to just test it out to make sure this actually does work and use web1-globo for our test machine. We'll tell that OK, and we're pretty much good to go from here. So remember, when we're at the point where we need to actually provide access, we need to go into the administrative tools to computer management and add those machines, those client machines or servers, whichever one that you need to have access to that application, and add them to that local group for this particular server. Alright, so let's go back to, hey, wait a minute, I think I accidentally closed out my server manager. Let's go back to that here. And let's go back to the roles section where we left off at, and here into Terminal Services. Alright, now that we have that, I'm going to take you in here into Web Server real quick. And you're thinking, why are we going into Web Server? Well, we have now made that remote application, those two remote applications available for use, right? We provided access to Excel and Word on this Terminal Server. Now, there's two ways that we can actually utilize these. We can create shortcuts on the desktop, or we can use web access. Now, all of our remote application programs are visible in TS Remote Access. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at that first. All right, and that's why I want to take you here to the web server, because when we open up Internet Information Services Manager, and we'll go ahead and turn off the action pane. Hey, this is something we've seen before, right? We'll go ahead and we will expand TS1 here. We'll see what sites are actually on our machine, and let's go ahead and expand this. All right, so here's our default website. Let's go to the TS section, or the TS home. Let's go ahead, let's browse this particular subdirectory, and that's really what we have here, okay? What we really have is kind of a subsite. Let's go ahead and browse this particular site, and you'll notice here that the address that I'm currently on is http://localhost/ts. Now, here's what happened, and you didn't even realize it. When you installed Terminal Services and we included web access in there, it actually created for us a website, or specifically a directory on the local host for remote access. And here you see we have remote app programs. Here's Microsoft Excel, and here is Microsoft Word. We're able to access this web access page, and you know what? We can click here on the configuration section just to see what is actually available here for us. And there's also a section for remote desktop, so we can also access remote desktop from this web page as well. We would simply type in the name of the computer that we wanted to connect to and specify the remote desktop size. So basically it's just a way to get to remote desktop and remote apps through a web page. And you know what, I think this is going to be one of the easier options for you when you're trying to give access to people, especially in the outside world, if you're including TS gateway into the mix as well. All right, so let's go ahead and close this. Just want to show you what it's supposed to look like. What we're going to do now is we're going to actually move over to the web server. Let's go ahead and minimize our TS1 on localhost. Let's go to a different computer here. We're going to go to our web server. I'm coming back over here to Server Manager, and you'll notice here that I do have a snapshot of my TS machine. I actually took this right after I got TS installed, and just as a quick confession, I like to make snapshots before I do too much, because in case I break something, I can always come back to the snapshot. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's open up Web 1, because we know that that has been added to our local group on the TS server. And you'll notice here that I actually have several snapshots of Web 1, just because I did a lot of stuff on it, and just in case something broke, I wanted to make sure I could go back to previous states of this particular machine. One quick caution of doing too many snapshots, your snapshots do take up disk space. Alright? So if you're snapshotting every 5 minutes, you're going to eat up your hard drive like crazy. Alright, so here's Web 1. Let's go ahead and click on Control-Alt-Delete to get into this. Let's go ahead and expand this screen here a little bit so we can see everything that's happening. Tell you what, let's go ahead and switch the user here real quick. Let's go to Globomantics. Let's log in as the super administrator here. Logging in as super coach instead of logging in as the local administrator, so I have full network access to pretty much whatever I want. We'll see if that actually works with the remote app tools that we just installed. And then as soon as this guy finishes booting all the way up, what we're going to do is we're going to open up a web browser, and we're going to see if we can actually get to that particular remote access page, and then we'll see if we can actually access those particular applications. Alright, there's Server Manager. Come on, Server Manager, let's go here. We're going to go ahead and open up Internet Explorer. While that guy's loading up, we'll just see how far we can push the CPU. And then what we'll do is we're going to go to http://ts1.globomantics.com/ts. Oops, got the wrong slash going the wrong way there. Let's try that one more time here. This should bring us actually to the default web page. It's not really what we're looking for. What we really want is the TS. Yep. Okay, well, we can reach ts1.globomantics.com, and it does have Internet Explorer 7 installed on it, but we need to get to the Terminal Services web app page. Let's go ahead and let's log in here. First of all, let's try SuperCoach, and let's see if we actually get access as the administrator. And that looks like it's not. So tell you what, we're going to have to make some alterations to that, huh? Let's go ahead and log in as a local administrator to start with. And it's going to prompt me for the security thing because we still have that security stuff turned on. We'll just go ahead and add in ts.globomantics.com real quick. And it is taking a little bit. You see here that, well, there we go. Okay. So here we are, remote app programs. Here are the applications that we made available. Let's go ahead and let's see if we can open up Microsoft Word here. Now, when we access Terminal Services applications, they're really going to look like a regular application. They're not going to be in a regular remote desktop type of window. All right, this looks good. Let's just tell this to continue. And it looks like we need to add in our credentials again here. So we'll go ahead and we'll do that. Again, we're logging in as the local administrator just to get this guy tested out to make sure that it is working correctly to begin with. If it's not working correctly to begin with, then we need to go back and do a little troubleshooting. But so far, everything is looking pretty good. It's just taking a little while to bring it up. There we go. So we went from starting to started. That's a good sign. So what we're actually doing is we're creating a session, if you will, a remote app session. And here comes Microsoft Word. Now, if you look down here at the bottom, you'll notice the word remote to let us know that this is actually opening up over on the server. what we're actually seeing here in this window, I know it looks like Microsoft Word on this computer, right? Let me go ahead and unpin this Web 1 here. It looks like Microsoft Word like it regularly would. However, all you're really seeing is an interface. Okay? This application is not running on this machine. This application is running over on the server, the TS1 server that we created. And all that we're really doing here is we're just seeing the interface and being able to interact with it. And it is going to prompt me for my product key. I'm just going to tell it to continue because I do get to run the program 25 times before it kicks me out and lets me stop using it. I'm just going to tell this next, whatever. Download and install updates. Just the typical stuff that you would see when Microsoft Office first boots up. All right, so again, what we're really seeing here is not the actual application. We're only seeing the interface to the application, even though, I mean, it looks like the application, right? I mean, it looks like regular old Microsoft Office. And it's not even in a remote desktop window, even though that's really the technology that we're writing over the top of. And I want to make sure that's clear to you. We're actually connecting via port 3389 over on TS1. This server right now is really acting more like a dummy terminal that is connecting to the server that contains the application. All right, let's go ahead and close this guy off. We know that we're able to access it and everything works. But we do need to start concerning ourselves now with the idea that we can't have our users logging in with the local administrator login to get to this particular web access page, right? So we need to start thinking now about permissions and user accounts and all that stuff and who gets to access this particular feature of terminal services. Now, I know we did talk a little bit about this when we started to install. During that installation wizard, we actually did set up a group that would have access to this. Now we don't have that installation wizard to go back to. So now what I want to do is I want to go back over to TS1 and I want to show you where you would need to go in order to make sure to add additional users or groups that will be able to actually access this particular feature. All right, let's move on over there. All right, so back over here on TS1, let's go to the Start menu now, and let's go to the Administrative Tools, and we're going to go back to Computer Management here, and we're going to go back over here to Local Users and Groups, and we've seen this before. Let's go into the Groups section. Here is the group that you will need to add users into for TS1 if you want them to access Terminal Services Remote App. So let's open up Remote Users. Now we set up sales users way back when we installed Terminal Services to begin with. Now we could go ahead and we could add additional users here if we wanted to. So let's say we want to add in like the web developer. Okay, let's say we want to give the web developer access. We can simply add him in, just like we would any other Active Directory element. So here's what I want you to remember: any new users that you need to add in or new groups, you will add them here in the remote desktop users property for the Terminal Services server. Okay, you're not going to add them back on your domain controller. You're going to add them to the remote desktop users property on the Terminal Services server. I want to make sure that it's clear to you. Okay, all right, let's cancel out of that. We got those set up. Now that we know where to go to, let's go ahead and let's try to access web access over on a Vista client like a user would normally access it. We're going to use a user in the sales group named Jay Patel, and so we're going to use his login, which is S Patel, and so we'll go ahead and let's bounce on over to a Vista client and let's see what that will look like in a regular day-to-day situation. Alright, so here I am over on a Vista client, and this is actually a virtual Vista client, just so you know, but you'll notice here that Jay Patel is logged in. So let's go ahead and let's open up an Internet Explorer to get to our Terminal Services server. And we know the address, right? http://ts1.globomantics.com. You notice here that I actually have gone to this before just to make sure that this will work. So let's go ahead and let's log in as globomantics/S Patel. Okay, well, we did get to the site, but looks like we're needing to add in a Terminal Services ActiveX client. Okay, well, let's go ahead and let's do that here. We're going to go ahead and click right on our yellow information bar and run the ActiveX control for TS Web Access. There we go. All right, now we're going to go ahead and see if we can open up Microsoft Word, and we get this same remote app box because we do not yet have our SSL certificate set up yet. So let's go ahead and let's make all of this available, and we'll go ahead and we'll connect. And now it's going to prompt me for credentials. Now, instead of logging in, again, I don't want my users logging in as the TS1 administrator. So we're going to log in as Globomantics/S Patel again. So really what I want you to keep in mind is you're going to be instructing your users to actually be able to access this. Make sure you tell them to include the domain name first and then their username. Oh, I misspelled it. Okay, well, let's try that again. Let's cancel out of that. Nice going, Coach. Yeah, that's some good type in there, isn't it? All right, so Globomantics/S Patel. And let's try this one more time. It's always useful to actually put in the correct domain rather than a domain that doesn't exist anywhere. There we go. Remote apps started. Okay, good news. Let's go ahead and see if this will pop up. Beautiful. Okay, so we were able to access our remote application over here on our Vista client with S Patel, because remember, he is a member of the sales users group, which is also a group of the remote desktop users over on TS1. Okay, enter your product key, whatever. That's something that we really should have put in earlier. All right, so everything works a-okay so far, so this is all good news. So we can go ahead and we could give our users this login and tell them, at least on the inside of our network, that they could go ahead and access Microsoft Office. Now, whatever software package that Hank has purchased, that will need to be installed on TS1 as well. But seeing as how Hank hasn't given us that, we can't really worry about that. All right, so now let's go back on over to our TS1 server. And let's talk about how we can distribute this application to users. There's a couple of cool little tools that I want to show to you that will make it easy for you to put shortcuts onto the desktop too. Now, this is kind of an optional thing at this point, because since we have web access available to us, we don't have to use shortcuts, and this might be the preferred method for your network as an overall organization. It may not be. So let's take a look at one more option, okay? All right, so back over here on the TS1 server, let's scroll over here for a second here, and you'll notice here that Microsoft Excel has been selected down here in Remote App Programs. And now these two little links are now available. We can create a remote desktop protocol file that we could go ahead and put on everybody's desktop so that they have access to this particular tool, and they don't have to go through the web interface. Let me go ahead. I'm going to put this on the desktop real quick. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to tell it next and finish. And what that's going to do is it's going to create for us, let me go ahead and go to the desktop now, a remote desktop protocol icon. So I can go ahead and double click on Excel here. And it will open up the remote application without having to use the actual remote web access. So you actually have two options here. Now, which one is going to be better? I'm going to probably suggest that you have desktop shortcuts, this little RDP file for people who are on the inside of your network, and then have remote access available over the web access page for your people who are out running around the countryside and all over the world. Let me go ahead and close out this Excel here. Now what I could do is I could take this icon, or this little RDP file, and I could use group policy to put it onto the desktop of users that are going to need this particular function. This is just a little bit of a nicety. I mean, it's really no different than using web access other than you're just skipping the web page part, right? You're still using remote desktop protocol to get to the applications on this terminal server. All right, let's go back over here to Server Manager. Let's take a look at one more. You can also create a Windows installer package, and we could create, let's go ahead and dump this to the desktop too, just so it's easy to find and to see. Not a huge difference in this instance. The only real difference here is that you actually are going to install it instead of just using the file. So we'll just tell it next and finish, and it's just going to create for us a cute little Windows installer package that we could also use. Let's double check the extension on it. It is a .msi program. So in this instance, we could actually use this with group policy software installation. Okay, this one, our little RDP file, we would actually use group policy preferences. Okay, so let me go ahead and make sure that you understand that. The remote desktop shortcut that I created, the little RDP file, you would use group policy preferences to take this file and put it onto the desktop of users that need it. You would use group policy software installation in order to install the MSI package. Okay, so some slight differences on how you distribute these things using group policy, but nevertheless you can still get the job done. Now, if you're not familiar with Active Directory and group policy software installation or group policy preferences, you can always go back and watch my Windows Active Directory course, which I did previously for Server 2008, or get a hold of a Microsoft Pressbook or something. But it's one of those nifty little items that you'll want to make sure that you know about if you're going to be using these two techniques to provide people access to your terminal server. If you're not going to use web access, that is, right? Okay, so now I've shown you how to set up remote app, and I've also shown you files you can create to distribute remote access shortcuts to your users. Now we need to start thinking a little more about how our users going to get to remote app if they're running around the countryside. So we need to turn our attention to TS Gateway, which utilizes Internet Information Services, or IIS, in order to provide access when folks are out running around the countryside all over the world in the field, and they still need to get access back over here to our home servers back on the premises. So let's talk about that. Alright, so to the gateway. Let's talk about the very typical setup that you're going to be using if you're providing access to users outside of your own home network. So let's start off with the client. The client is going to be connecting over the internet via remote desktop protocol, and we're going to be using SSL encryption. Now, the request is going to go through the DMZ, or demilitarized zone, where you actually have a firewall, probably some type of firewall appliance or maybe a server box, whatever your firewall happens to be. Then in the middle, you're going to have a domain controller with TS Gateway running. Okay? Now, TS Gateway is also going to include IIS. Now, this is going to be a separate machine from the actual machine that's going to hold your terminal services remote app applications. Then we're going to have another firewall here, and then that connection is going to go to your TS servers where your remote app lives, and then send information back through the firewalls and through the gateway server, through the internet, and back to the client. Wow, that's some great artwork, isn't it? So I mean, that's really what's going to be happening when you're implementing TS Gateway. Now, I want to let you know that there is no VPN required for this. Because you're connecting over SSL and you're going to be using certificates, probably of a third-party type or from a certificate authority, then you're going to be okay in terms of security and encryption, as much as you can be when you're connecting over the internet. Now, let me tell you just a couple of quick notes here about this. Instead of using a domain controller with TS Gateway in the middle of your DMZ, this may not necessarily be your favorite option. You could be possibly putting your domain controller information, your Active Directory database, in a less than optimum spot. So if you want to take your domain controller and your TS Gateway and put it on the inside of your router or your firewalls, then you can actually put ISA server in its place and make your gateway available that way. Now, if you're going to be doing that, I'll need you to understand that you'd also need to take the SSL certificate that is being used on ISA server and also install it over on the TS Gateway machine. Your remote desktop connection shortcuts are also going to need to be configured on the client machines whenever you're using TS Gateway in this fashion. So there's a quick technique I'm going to show you here in just a minute so you know exactly how to configure your remote desktop connections when you're using laptops all over the world. Okay, so just a couple of quick notes. Now, I can't really necessarily show you this implementation, but I do want to take you into the TS Gateway interface and want to show you just a little bit about where our SSL certificates live at for this. We actually did configure the SSL certificate. We created a self-signed certificate when we did the initial installation wizard. We actually selected the self-signed certificate, and so it's already there. The nice thing about that wizard, it does a lot of work for us. We don't have to get too heavy into the configuration. Although obviously there's going to be times where you want to go in and tweak and configure. So I'm going to take you through the interface a little bit. I'm going to take you into IIS. We're going to double check to make sure there is a certificate there. More or less show you what the interface should look like if we're doing an implementation such as this. Then I'm also going to take you and show you how to configure your remote desktop shortcut too. All right? So let's go back on over to TS1 and let's just take a quick walkthrough of this. All right, so we're back over here on TS1, and we're going to go into the Terminal Services section. Here is our TS Gateway Manager. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at this one. Let's expand this, and here's TS1 Local. Now, when you're looking at your gateway, you're also going to be able to see how many remote clients are connected, how many users are connected to the server, and how many resources those users are connected to. Let's take just a quick look at these authorization policies now. I need you to know that these were actually set up. We did these again during the initial installation wizard. Microsoft tried to make this thing as easy as possible to implement. When we go into the authorization policies, we have the CAP, Connection Authorization Policy, which basically just tells us, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the actions palette over here so you can see the whole thing, basically provides us with the rules for connection if the user is a member of any of the following groups: built-in administrators or Globomantic sales users. And the client computer is a member of any of the following groups. Well, we don't have that configured, but we could go in here and we could go into the properties of this CAP, Connection Authorization Policy, and we could go into the requirements and we could add a group of computers, probably a group of laptops, that we're going to allow to connect via Terminal Services Gateway. And again, we can also use smart cards if we so desire as well. Now, for the time being, if we leave this blank, that really means that any client computer can connect, but they still have to log in and they still have to be a member of one of these two groups. Now, this built-in administrators, this is actually your local administrator set, okay? All right, let's cancel that out. Let's take a look at the resource authorization policy. Again, you see the Globomantic sales users group that we added in here. And you'll see the allowed resources here. Access allowed to all network resources. We want to right click and go again into its properties. We have the user groups. We're going to allow computer groups if we want to specify which computers get to connect, and also which ports that we're going to allow to connect as well. All right, now there's also the monitoring section. All right, so this is going to show us the computers that are connected to the TS server via the gateway. Now, this is not going to be showing us the connections from the inside of the network. So if I went over to the Vista client and connected, we're not actually going to see that here. But again, I wanted to just stop and reiterate here for just a second that this Gateway Manager role service is going to be on a separate machine. Now, I have it installed on this machine just so I can show you what it was real quick, because right now I only have one Terminal Services machine up and running. So in this instance, we actually have everything on this one machine just so you can see what it looks like and notice what it actually is doing here. Now, if I want to see people who are connected, I can go down here to the Terminal Services Manager, and let's see if we can't get this guy to actually tell us. Okay, looks like we do have one connection active. That is S. Patel. That's that machine that we had over on the Vista machine here. This one's active. Looks like we have a SuperCoach console, which is, of course, this one, active, and then we have an administrator, which is disconnected. So we do get to see who is doing what on the sessions here, and the easiest way to see who's connected is just to look at the user column. So our Terminal Services Manager just It's a real nice interface that just lets us know who's doing what. Also here you can see the client name. You can see actually which machine is connected, not only just the user but also the machine, and whether it's active or disconnected or not. All right, so that just gives you a quick idea of a few other things that are available inside of TS and the TS Gateway Manager. And I probably should make a quick mention here real quick that if you're going to be using TS Gateway Manager, you can still use either the web access or you can use the shortcuts, because either way you're going to be connecting via the remote desktop protocol. Now I'm going to make a quick mention of this again to you. If you're going to be publishing this stuff out to the outside world, it's a really good idea to use Microsoft's ISA server for secure connections, okay? And not to mention ease of publishing to the outside world. So I'm going to recommend that you put an ISA server in your DMZ rather than put your full domain controller out in the middle of a DMZ. Just not sure I'm real comfortable with that. Much prefer that a domain controller be way on the inside of my router rather than on the perimeter of the network. All right, real quick, I want to show you now what it will take in order to configure a remote desktop protocol file to use the gateway services. All right, so rather than use this Excel file, because this RDP, when I go to edit, I don't really get any options that I need there for that. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go to the Start menu and use the regular remote desktop connection instead. And we're going to go ahead, we're going to put in here ts1.globalmantics.com. And I'm going to go here to Options. And we're going to go to Advanced. And you see down here where it says Connect from Anywhere, configure settings to connect through TS Gateway when I'm working remotely. So I click here on Settings. And there's one or two things I could do. I could automatically detect TS Gateway server settings, or I could specify a very specific TS Gateway server if that's what I'm needing to do. So basically here's where you would go to connect. Now most of the time you can just leave this automatically detect TS Gateway server settings as it is. Very rarely are you going to need to do anything else. And of course if you're utilizing this method you would actually save this as an RDP file. So I can just go ahead and save, and I can make the alteration here, just call this RDP for Gateway. All right, I'm going to cancel that guy out, and that's how you configure a remote desktop connection for use with the gateway if that's what you're going to be using to connect. Now again, if you're going to be using shortcuts like these, you probably not worried about it too much. If you are using web access, well then that's kind of a no-brainer, right? I mean, if you're already using web access, that simplifies things even more. So just a few more things to keep in mind when you are implementing TS Gateway to allow users from the outside to actually get into the interior of your network. All right, friends. Well, hey, that wraps this one up. Let's go ahead and let's bounce back on over to our slides. Let's go ahead and do a wrap up, and then we'll move on to the next lesson. All right, so here's our vocabulary. RDP stands for Remote Desktop Protocol, method of connecting to other computers and having a desktop interface. And here's the big one that I want you to remember. Create an RDP file for easy connections. You can do that either from the TS Gateway interface, or you can create your own like I just showed you. TS Gateway, a role service of terminal services that allows access to a terminal services server without the need for a VPN, because you can actually connect over the internet using RDP, but you're using, remember, secure socket layer connections for encryption for additional security. And then, of course, remember that remote desktop users is the local computer group that you will add users and groups to that will be able to access the terminal services server, right? I know I've kind of hounded on that one, but it's one of those things that's real easy to slip your mind. So I wanted to make sure that I drove that one home for you. What we covered, and after watching this video, you should be able to install applications on a TS server and publish them via remote app, and that's a wizard, right? Use web access to utilize applications on the server via remote app. Now, web access, remember you need to install that as a role service and also make sure that your remote applications, remote apps, are configured to use it as well. And you notice that I really didn't do anything special to make that happen, right? Add additional users and groups to the local remote desktop users group of the TS server using the Computer Management MMC. Remember that you find that under Administrative Tools in the Start menu. I've shown you how to create RDP files and MSI installation packages to distribute your shortcuts to users via group policy. Now, I didn't really show you how to distribute them via group policy because, well, I'm assuming you already know how to do that. Either you have already watched my Active Directory video course or you already have that experience. For the folks who are going to be using TS Remote apps, I want you to be at least be able to describe a TS Gateway implementation and configure a remote desktop connection file to use TS Gateway. All right, friends, well, that wraps up this video, and I will see you in the next one.